Tonight on Dr. Phil Primetime. What happened here?
We just had a massive failure of leadership at many levels. This is the largest urban disaster in the history of the country. $250 billion worth of damage. The second largest city in the world, and your fire hydrants aren't working?
What is the explanation?
I don't know. Mayor Bass, she was warned that the fire department would not be able to protect the city with additional cutbacks. She cut it back by $20 million.
You believe there has been gross negligence here. Do you think it rises to the level of criminal?
Breaking news in Southern California, where raging wildfires continue to roar across LA County. The Pacific Palisades fire is now the most destructive fire in LA history. An estimated 1,000 structures have now been destroyed, and new updated numbers reveal 5 people have died, and officials warn the worst is still to come.
As the fires sweep across Southern California, they are 0% contained. The flames are being fueled by powerful Santa Ana winds up to 100 miles per hour. There are now 5 separate fires: Palisades, Hearst, Woodley, Olivas, and the Eaton fire. They are burning more than 26,000 acres combined. Tens of thousands of people are being forced to evacuate their homes. Many are without power.
Plus, there's a lack of water that has really hampered the efforts to put these fires out. Firefighters in Pacific Palisades have really pushed the supply to the limit, so the fire hydrants have even run dry.
As someone that has spent over 2 decades living in Los Angeles, California, I learned that when you drive around the city, there are certain places you go by and people will say, that's a Caruso. They're talking about quality architecture and building that was created by someone named Rick Caruso. He's a builder, a developer, a philanthropist, and a leader in Los Angeles. He recently ran for mayor, and he has a lot to say about leadership, or the lack thereof, with the recent fires. I sit down with him tonight to talk about what happened to devastate so many structures and lives in Los Angeles. Rick, thank you for sitting down with me and talking about this. I'm sorry for the occasion.
Thank you.
I wish we were talking about anything else. In full disclosure to our viewers, I consider you a friend, and we've known each other a good while, but I have tremendous respect for you and what you do.
Thank you.
The mark you've had on this city speaks for itself.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Things that you, in terms of commercial development and the things you've done philanthropically for this city, thank you for what you've done, and thank you for what you're doing now.
Thank you.
Let's talk about what's happened here. The fires that we've had out here, all total, have impacted 50,000 acres of people's homes and businesses that have just been absolutely devastated. And 29 people have lost their lives. We still have some missing.
Right.
And I want to ask you a broad question to begin with. What happened here?
What happened was a result of a real lack of leadership. And first of all, let me just back up and say thank you for being here. And thank you for shining a light on this, because this is the largest urban disaster in the history of the country. 2.5 times the size of Manhattan. And so the scale of it. And when you go through it, and I was out there again yesterday, I still can't get my head around it when you see it. And I still get emotional when I see it, because the devastation, it literally looks like it's been carpet bombed, whether it's the Palisades or it's out in Altadena. It's just carpet bombed. So homes are destroyed, lives are destroyed. But when you get to the core of it, and I've been openly critical, because that's just the way I am. I want to be honest about it, because I think we need to understand what happened so it doesn't happen again. We just had a massive failure of leadership at many levels that allowed this thing to roar through these neighborhoods and destroy lives.
This is also personal for you. You've had a family member lose their home.
2. My daughter lost her home. It was burnt to the ground. They had just finished the home. Been in it for about a year, her and her boyfriend. They'd been together for 6 years, so this was obviously a home that they had their dreams of, their lives together. And my son and his wife lost their home, and she's pregnant. And of course, they had dreams of raising their child there. My son's home is standing, but the smoke damage to the home is such that you can't live in it. And it's literally the only home in the area. So you're not going to live there. So it is personal. And the downtown that we built and we own is standing. We were able to save that, which is great. And we're going to reopen that as soon as we can. But it's mind-boggling just to think about, there was all of these warnings, catastrophic, literally, quote unquote, catastrophic winds are coming. This is a few days beforehand. Life-threatening winds. I'd never seen descriptions of winds. I've lived my whole life in LA. We have the Santa Ana winds. I've never heard them described as that. So everybody knew we were going to have this incredible event of winds. We had a fire a couple miles from the Palisades in Malibu 3 weeks before. This is a fire-prone area. We've got vegetation that's behind the Palisades that people for years, including myself, have been raising heck about in terms of having it managed and trimmed. And literally, I got a call at 10 o'clock, 10:30 on the 7th from one of my senior executives who was in the command post to report to me, we had evacuated the whole family, to report to me that we had lost our daughter's home, and lost our daughter's home because the hydrants went dry. The firefighters were literally standing there with hoses with no water coming out of them. And I couldn't believe it. The second largest city in the world and your fire hydrants aren't working?
How is that possible? There are reservoirs around, except for Santa Ynez. That was not full.
Right, it was empty. They had it emptied.
But then the others were full. Is it a problem that there wasn't enough water pressure?
No, because they're all gravity fed. So here's the layers of problems that happens as I see it. And this is all based on facts. The vegetation was never properly managed. So that was a years and years and years of a problem not being addressed. Then you had the Department of Water and Power, for some reason, deciding that this main reservoir was going to be out of service because there was a tear in the cover. But they had it out of service at a peak period that there could be fire. So that's just foolish, to say the least. The other two reservoirs were drained quickly because of the fire, but they weren't replenishing them quick enough. The fire department didn't pre-deploy. They didn't send out fire trucks in the areas to be stationed there as the winds began. So by the time they were responding, the fire started growing too quickly. We have fire trucks and fire equipment in the city of Los Angeles that are in mothballs because they don't have the money to have mechanics to have them operating. And even this year alone, Mayor Bass cut back the budget to the fire department against the wishes of the fire department. And she was warned that the fire department would not be able to protect the city with additional cutbacks. She cut it back by $20 million. So you could make the argument, maybe you couldn't have prevented the fire. Only God knows. I make the argument, even if you couldn't prevent the fire, you would have been able to substantially mitigate the impact of that fire had people done their jobs right and been prepared for it.
I haven't lived here all my life, but I was here for 20 years, and these winds come, and we know that they come ever so often, but this was a different wind event. Everybody knew that, it was on the news.
Right.
Everybody was talking about it, right?
Absolutely.
This wasn't a surprise. You say this was a multi-level failure of leadership. Why didn't they have fire trucks and crews pre-deployed in areas that are tinderboxes? This stuff is rocket.
It's rocket built.
It can explode. It's not like somebody throws a match out there or something that people think about, well, could you start a fire? It can explode.
That's right.
So we know that that's possible. What is the explanation of why they didn't have these trucks spread around these high populous areas? Because I've seen the maps. They know where the high risk areas are.
It was sobering to be in the air and see the destruction from the air, how many homes were burning. It was like a war zone on the ground. And compared to most of the fires we see in this season, this is on a scale of destruction to the urban center that we haven't seen.
What is the explanation of why they didn't have these trucks spread around these high populous areas? Because I've seen the maps, they know where the high risk
That's right.
areas are.
I don't know. I can't tell you. I mean, I think you've got to ask the mayor. You know, I don't know what meetings she had before this, before she left the country, you know, with every department head. Are you prepared? Are you stationed? What are your plans? I can tell you what we did, you know, owning that downtown that we built. The minute the wind prediction came out, we deployed. We have a protocol, depending on the disaster that we're dealing with, and we have this rapid response team. And that rapid response team goes into action, and we had water trucks deployed. We had retardant trucks deployed, and we have a team of private firefighters deployed. And we were ready, and that's why that center got saved. In addition to the fact we built it with non-combustible materials, knowing that we were in a high-risk fire area. But why the city wasn't as prepared, I can't tell you. I wish they had been, because if they had been close to where that fire started, just like what happened 3 weeks prior, they put it out right away. So they knew. They had even an additional warning, Phil. They had a fire in the same exact area 3 weeks at a time. And then a couple months before that, if you remember, we had a fire in Malibu. So it's not like we weren't aware that we're in a high-risk fire season, and now you're combining it with these epic winds. You better be extra prepared. Like I told my team, I know you're good. Whatever you planned on doing, you had plans to do, multiply it times 2 and just be over-prepared.
There's technology now, and I know this because I work with Homeland Security and all. They've allowed me access to see a lot of the technology that's available, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because some of it's crime-oriented, but I know with satellite technology, infrared technology, and cameras that are available, that they can spread these things throughout the desert and different areas and spot if an event takes place, whether it's movement or fires. Are we using AI? Are we using infrared technologies? Are we using everything that's available?
I don't think so.
Because this is a tinderbox here. I mean, come on, this is dry California.
Yeah, I don't know if we are. I doubt it. Apparently not, because we had this kind of damage. But I'm not quite sure that we've brought the firefighting capabilities of the 21st century to LA or LA County. Because to your point, there's a lot more things that could be done that aren't being done. But when you've got an administration that continues to reduce the budget, there's no way that you're going to advance the technology of serving the public, right? You're putting a force in the opposite direction. So when you have basic equipment that isn't capable of working because you don't have enough mechanics to keep them running. Here's an interesting number everybody should know. In 1965, LA City had about 2+ million people. Today it has about 2 million people. Now we have about 4 million people. You advance it to today, we have less fire stations today than we did in 1965 because of budget constraints. We have fire stations throughout the city of Los Angeles that are closed and not operating because of budget restrictions. So you have 2 times the amount of people. I think you have about 100 times the amount of calls, and you've got less stations to respond to it. We've gone in the wrong direction, and the people in the Palisades have paid a dear price, and for that matter, in Altadena and Malibu too. We lost a home in Malibu, and based on what we saw, there wasn't a fire truck anywhere near where the homes were burning.
And of course, I think people were saying, well, why aren't they doing these drops? Why aren't they coming over with retardant and that sort of thing? I've been a pilot all my life. It's a little hard to fly an airplane in 60, 70 mile an hour winds. and they're gusting, and they do have embers in them. There are certain circumstances you just can't safely fly in.
That's right. That's right. Hopefully there's an after-action report on all of this, right? What happened? What could we have done better and what not? And you're right, because of the winds, they weren't getting the planes up. But when the fire started, the winds were not really bad. So the question is, were they prepared to get some of these planes with the retardant up early to start creating lines and blocking the fire's progression? I don't think that was done. And then, as you said, once the winds really started peaking, they couldn't get up in the air.
How did these fires start? Has that been determined?
I haven't heard. The fire that started in the area a few weeks before this was there were kids that were shooting off fireworks. And that was one that was put out. There's some talk that maybe that just continued to smolder, you know, and wasn't completely out, or somebody went back up there, but I don't know for sure.
Maybe the winds swooped it back up?
Yeah, could have been. Could have been.
Put this in perspective. How big an area has been devastated in the Palisades and Altadena? Compare it to something people know. How is it compared to Manhattan? How is it compared to another city like, I don't know, Dallas or San Antonio or Sacramento? How is it compared to a big housing area?
2.5 times the size of Manhattan. So take 2 Manhattans, 2.5 Manhattans, and that's the level of devastation. I think the estimate now is $250 billion worth of damage. But we've got tens of thousands of people. And here's what also really worries me. Tens of thousands of people that are out of a job. The service workers, the gardeners, the waiters, the small business people, all of the people that were serving, there's 17,000 structures that were burned down. All the people that were servicing those structures are all out of a job, and there's no safety net for them. And it's something that I've been working with the governor and the county, saying we've got to build some kind of a fund for them. So the devastation, in addition to somebody losing their home, they've lost their job. And just to add one other point, you know, Palisades is regarded as a wealthy area, but the reality is many, many people in the Palisades had lived there for 30, 40, 50 years. You have a lot of people that were house rich and cash poor that will never be able to afford to rebuild that house, or maybe just not even insured. But, you know, what is the lifeline for also those people who are very moderate income, elderly, that have lost their home? I was talking to a gentleman in his 90s, lived in the Palisades for 60 years with his wife who was in her 90s. House burned down. What does that family do? So the government needs to come to their aid on this.
Because they may have acquired that home, built that home, bought that home at a relatively modest number.
Absolutely.
And then across time, it has skyrocketed because that has become a very desirable area. It's near the coast. It's beautiful. It's hilly. And some of them, the insurance companies have jacked the rates and then pulled out on a lot of them.
That's right.
So many of those people that I've heard their stories were without insurance.
That's right.
Because some of the big insurance companies, Allstate, State Farm, and others, failed to renew their policies in recent years. And then the assessment of their homes were so high they couldn't afford to get them insured if they could.
That's right.
So what do they do now? They have lost their homes, and they don't have insurance. So what they've got is a pile of rubble and a piece of dirt that's toxic right now.
Mm-hmm.
Where do they go? We've got like 150,000 people that are displaced.
That's right.
Where are these people today as we sit here right now? Where are they?
I was at school, I saw the fire in person, and it didn't look that bad, so I thought it was like a free day off. I thought it was gonna be easy to contain. And then when I came home, after like an hour, it started getting worse and worse. I got scared and nervous. I feel like it's just weird. It doesn't feel real.
We've got like 150,000 people that are displaced. Where are these people today as we sit here right now? Where are they?
They've been completely displaced. I mean, you have people in shelters and Red Cross shelters. You have people obviously living with family and all of that. The pricing on apartments has skyrocketed. The pricing on homes has skyrocketed. But for the moderate person, very few options. So their option probably is they're going to be forced to sell that land in order to pay for their life, their lifestyle. And it's going to be really tough.
Was this avoidable? If it's predictable, it's preventable.
That's my line. I agree with that. Predictable, preventable. I think so. Had they cleared the vegetation as it should have been cleared years ago, you wouldn't have had the rocket fuel to create the embers to have this thing flying across the region, right? 6 years ago, we live in Brentwood. 6 years ago, there was a small fire in Brentwood that was along the 405 freeway, as you know. And I said at the time to my wife and the kids, we had to evacuate. If that starts traveling west, gets into the Palisades, it's going to roar down to the Alphabet Street. So for people who don't know, there's this little mountain region called the Santa Susana Mountains. I think it's the Santa Susana Mountains. It comes right down into the residential neighborhood. And that residential neighborhood, historically, are homes that are built very close. That, they've been there 50, 60 years, whatever the case is. And so when it came down there, it just went from house to house. There was nothing to stop it, especially when you don't have water. Had the vegetation been gone, it would have been a barrier to where that fire could have gone. And that's what angers me, is the simple act of clearing the vegetation, I think would have had most of these people back in their homes by now.
We have a team that come around our property and they go like 50 yards outside our fence lines and scop everything down so there's no fuel.
Yeah, smart.
Around the house, so there's nothing to burn.
These people can't do it on public property. Those mountains are public property. So you protect your home, right? But there's always a big debate around whether or not you've got some vegetation that's rare that you have to save, or there's something in there that you can't affect. It's complicated here, and that needs to get changed.
Look, I've been here long enough to know that if you want a permit to put in a light switch, you need to start planning on this so your grandkids come. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? I mean, seriously, the permitting process in LA County is a nightmare. It can take forever. Is that going to paralyze this process of getting these homes cleared and getting them back in? How do we cut through that bureaucracy?
We were literally the only ones in a neighborhood full of 100 houses burning down, and we found this one elderly man trying to water his car down with his pets inside of it, with literally everything burning around him. It looked like a nuke just went off in the middle of LA.
The permitting process in LA County is a nightmare. It can take forever. Is that going to paralyze this process of getting these homes cleared and getting them back in? How do we cut through that bureaucracy?
Well, what the mayor has done, to her credit, is she's cutting the red tape and expediting the process to get a permit. So hopefully she's cut enough red tape to do it. One of the things that we're looking at doing is working with Amazon, for example, in digitizing and creating an AI model. And there's some other programs that have done this, some other cities that are testing it, so that all of the city codes are put into an AI model. And when you are ready to rebuild, you submit your plans in that application, and it gets plan checked very quickly, within hours versus within weeks or months. And that's the kind of thinking that we need to do to expedite this, because when you're talking about rebuilding this many homes, there's not enough people to plan check. So what we want to do, what I'm focused on doing, is what I'm calling is bending the curve. If somebody is saying it's going to take us a year to get this project done, whatever that project may be, how do we go in and get this project done in 3 months? I really believe people should be able to start building their homes no later than a year. We should be able to get in there, get it cleaned up, get the rubble gone, put in new infrastructure, underground the power lines, new water mains, new fire hydrants. Don't build the same damn thing. We know it's a high-risk area. Build it to a 21st standard century, the infrastructure, and then start getting people building simultaneously. So you bring that community back to life and bring business back to life out there.
How many structures are gone?
17,000
17,000?
between Altadena, Pasadena, and Malibu.
So what do you do with all of that rubble? How do you get it out of here? Where does it go?
It's going to landfills. And so they've designated, the government, federal government has designated landfills through Army Corps. And I think they've projected something like 1 million truckloads just out of the Palisades alone.
And these go into landfills that are lined, and so it's contained. So it doesn't, we don't get into land water. We don't take this and make it somebody else's problem.
Right. I would hope so. I mean, I would imagine that the contaminated soil that's being removed by the EPA and the contaminated items, they're going to a separate licensed fill to handle that. And then the rubble that's non-hazardous will go to a different kind of landfill.
And how long is it going to take to get that out of here?
Well, we haven't seen a schedule yet from the city. That's what we're still waiting for. And I don't think it should take more than a few months, honestly, but we haven't seen a schedule. Originally, the number that was proposed was 18 months. And of course, the residents have gone crazy over that idea.
Tell me about Steadfast.
So Steadfast LA is a nonprofit group I started. I asked a bunch of really smart and talented people to dedicate their time and their talent to lean in and be an issue-driven organization that we can help the city, the state, the federal government solve critical problems to get people moving back quicker. So the lens of this is, what do we need to do to get people back in their homes or starting to build quicker? And as you know, government agencies don't necessarily move with a lot of speed. We believe in order to tackle the scope of this problem, you need a public-private partnership. And we want to provide the tools so the city and the state and the county can make some good decisions, like undergrounding the power lines. At first, they said they're not going to. Now they're saying they will do it, but I'm also hearing they don't know how to pay for it. Well, we can help them figure out the plan for that, the plan for undergrounding. So we've got some great companies that are leaning in, and we're going to make some, I think, some very positive announcements in the next couple of weeks.
And you're doing all of this as a volunteer. I mean, you're putting your time and effort into this.
Right. And I'm funding the nonprofit. We're not looking for money. I'm not looking for money to fund it. I'm funding it. I just want to get the process moving. And I want to also hold the elected and the appointed officials accountable that they're doing the right thing every day, that we're making the right moves and the right decisions to get people back in their homes.
The Olympics are coming.
Yeah, 4 years, less than 4 years.
And I've heard some of the politicians saying can't do both.
It's wrong.
Can't fix the city and get ready for the Olympics at the same time.
You can do all
You
the
don't
above.
believe that?
Do all the above, absolutely not. Can you imagine running your life that way?
No.
No, no, you lean in and you go solve that problem. I mean, they announced they're not going to make an investment in the convention center that they were planning on making because they're worried that there's too many people in the city having to focus on the rebuilding of the Palisades. Well, organize around that, staff up around that, create a governance system around that. You have to do both. The city's got to be ready for the Olympics. We've got to have our best foot forward. That's a defeatist attitude that gains nothing other than failure.
That kind of talk could scare the Olympic Committee away.
It sure can. It will certainly scare the tourist away.
Yeah, for sure.
And we need the tourism dollars in this city.
You say you're about ready to open back up. There are 150,000 people gone.
Right.
Can your businesses that occupy the beautiful area that you've built and has been such a heartbeat of the Palisades, will there be a customer base? And will you have employees to put in there? And will there be people to interact with?
Well, I think so. I mean, honestly, here's the way I look at it. And we're not going to open up until all the hazardous waste is clean and the place is safe, obviously. It has got to be a beacon of hope. It's got to be the basis where people can come back together and reunite, because not only did people lose their homes, as you know, they lost every form of sense of community. The church they go to, the synagogue they go to, the park they went to, the schools have burnt down. There is no place to gather anymore. So it's not going to make a lot of financial sense to me to reopen that center right now. But we've got to do it because we've got to be a place where people can come together.
It's the heartbeat. It's always been.
Right. And if we do it, it's going to give people hope. I was with a bunch of residents yesterday that just wanted me to hear from them their concerns, and they needed to hear, we're going to be okay. We're in this with you. And the more that people see that, and they see that center come back to life, and they can go grab lunch there and meet their friends, they're going to want to rebuild. They're going to want to come back. And that's what we got to do. We got to create that path.
Are you going to seek office in LA or California in the future?
I may. I'm not thinking about that now. We have time to figure that out. My focus right now is getting this part of the region rebuilt. You know, down the road, honestly, if there's a role for me to do good and work hard, I've always loved public service. I think it's an honorable job. I would certainly take a look at it, but I've got time to figure that out. That's not on today's agenda, meaning the next couple of months, I wake up every morning like I've got a rocket in my belly. It's crazy. I want to get this place started. And I have no patience for somebody feeling defeated in the city or not making good decisions or pushing to the point that it's uncomfortable. We have to push people to the point it's uncomfortable because we've got thousands of people hurting.
You believe there has been gross negligence here.
Yes.
Do you think it rises to the level of criminal? You believe there has been gross negligence here.
Yes.
Do you think it rises to the level of criminal?
You know, it could. That's for somebody else to decide. That's for a prosecutor to decide.
Lives were destroyed here.
And more will be. And I tell you why I say that, because as you know, the depression that sets in, the pain of people, it's like, even I told my daughter, you know, who lost her home, I said, you have to go through a grieving process. It's okay. And everybody's going through that. These 20 people I met with yesterday were saying that. They're going through this grieving process. And, you know, we're fortunate we have options. So, you know, we're going to be fine, thank God. But there's so many people out there, as you know, that don't have options. And I worry about depression setting in with people and feeling helpless. And again, we've got to give people hope. Altadena, Palisades, and out of Malibu too, for that matter.
You know, in the beginning, I think there's a certain adrenaline that gets people through. People are like, you know, we'll never give up. We're coming back.
Right.
But then the cameras go away, the rallies go away, the next headline comes in,
Yeah.
and then they're just left with kind of hopelessness and a real sense of being alone, and insurance companies that don't pick up the phone, and options that continue to narrow, and they just are forlorn. It's like, where do I turn? I'm just a statistic now. And that's where it really begins to take a toll, and with depression and kind of a sense of learned helplessness, where it's like I've learned that I'm helpless to impact the situation. And you know, you opening back up and creating Steadfast and bringing in things that accelerate the process is a way to impact the collective consciousness where people say, you know, there's somebody over here that's not going with the flow. There's somebody over here that's pushing back. And God bless you for doing that, Rick. Seriously.
But I'm pretty lucky, though, Phil. That community was so good to me and my family, so good to us. And it's a dear, beautiful community. And they embraced us and supported us, and they gave that village life. They gave it a soul. So, of course, I'm going to do it. It's the least I can do.
And everything you're doing was steadfast. I read the tweets, I read the reports, I read the people you're bringing in. You just brought in 2 new folks on this. That transparency gives people hope, and holding the bureaucrats accountable really gives people hope because it's transparent. They can see into the system, and accountability is going to be important. And I don't know whether DEI hires had an impact on all of this stuff, and I don't know whether cutbacks to the budget contributed to this specific disaster or not. But I know going forward that there has to be some specific connection between decisions that are made and things that need to happen to change the trajectory. Because if we stay on the same trajectory we've been on, these winds are coming back. And, you know, they may be 3 canyons over. People that don't live here don't know, but we got canyons, right? And you can get over into Laurel Canyon or Coldwater Canyon or whatever, and it can come up through one of those canyons instead of out here. And we can be right in the same situation. And is it fixed? I mean, are the water problems fixed? Is the infrastructure fixed? And the answer is no.
We're right. We got to do it right.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity here in the midst of all the heartache and all the devastation. There's also an opportunity here to do something really special for the next 100 years with the best technology, the best infrastructure, that you're building a city that's got the best schools now, the best public facilities now, right? So this community is going to come back, and it's going to come back roaring. Same with Altadena. But we've got to have that mindset, not to build what was there. We want to build what was there in terms of the dearness and the sweetness of the culture of the community and the architecture of the community. That should stay. But the backbone and the infrastructure should be the 21st century, that our students are getting the best education and the best classrooms now in these areas, right? The best facilities in the parks in these areas now. Why would we do anything less than that?
Yeah.
And so that's an exciting thing to focus on. And that gets me obviously excited, and my team excited to think about that.
How long will it be before Altadena and Palisades are back? How long will it be before Altadena and Palisades are back?
I think that in 3 to 5 years, it's going to look, if everything is done right, 3 to 5 years, it's going to look just like a community. There's still going to be construction. People are still going to be building homes. That's going to be happening. There's no doubt there's a lot of homes. But in terms of the park being built, the schools being built, the downtown coming back, a lot of the neighborhoods coming back, I think it's 3 years. I'm optimistic about that.
That would be wonderful. That would absolutely be wonderful. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to message to LA, to California, to this country? Because this has impacted this entire country.
It really does. I mean, it's a tragedy in America. And I guess I would say this, the impact of those fires on the greater Los Angeles area has been pretty dramatic. Business around the area has really gone down. I think people in the area, rightfully so, feel sad about what happened. They're not going out as much. I talked to a restaurant supplier that supplies many of the restaurants through LA, said his business in January is down 60%. Wow. Way down. Small businesses are hurting, really hurting. Small restaurants owners. So I would say this, LA's still in business, and people go out and enjoy life, and we're going to get through this. But what we really need you to do now is to get out and support businesses, especially small businesses and the restaurants and the clothiers and all of that, because we need it. People are suffering who are not even in the fire areas. And, you know, to the rest of the United States, come out and visit us. It's still a great place to visit, so don't be scared of that.
Well, I'm glad you said that because LA is open for business. This is a big, big city and restaurants are still open. We're here in the Grove, which you built, and it's here, it's open, it's thriving. People shouldn't write this off because these fires took place. It's a great destination. Rick, let's stay in touch and keep us apprised of what's going on. And Steadfast organization is going to be the spark plug that moves this. I know that it is. So we want to keep a light on this. So
I appreciate
people don't forget about it.
I'll do my best.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the time.
You bet. Thank you.
For the spotlight on this.
You bet. Well, that's what we want to do at Merit TV. We want to keep a spotlight on things that matter to people who care.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's what we're doing. Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank Rick Caruso for taking the time to sit down with us and talk about these devastating fires in Los Angeles. Somewhere between 35 and 40,000 acres. I think he said twice the size of Manhattan Island in New York City. Just completely devastated. 150,000 people displaced. There's got to be a dig out. And we can't just go back and do the same thing again. There's got to be a complete rebuild of infrastructure as well as people's lives. So thanks to Rick Caruso for taking time, sharing the vision, and giving us some insight into Steadfast, the nonprofit that's bringing so many different talented people from different disciplines together. We'll be watching as LA begins to rebuild and come back from this terrible devastation.